Which Chelek is this Sicha from today?
I think it's Yud Zayin, but I don't even. Tzipa, is it Yud Zayin?
It says Tes Zion Sicha
Tes
Zayin.
Zayin. Tes Zayin.
Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're on. We're learning the Sicha on Boy. This is the only Sicha for this week through the project. And as just ascertained, thank you, Tzipa, it's from Chelek to Zayin. We're learning in the Schos of Rafo Shalema for Harav Yosef Yitzchak B'Tzima Chasya. And I'm going to begin. It's a very interesting Sicha. I mean, that's lame. Every Sicha is very interesting. But it's, you'll see, it's a great workout. Aleph. B'kesher l'tzivui. So in connection to the commandment in this week's Parsha, and I'm going to read a couple of the psukim here. So it begins with Perek Yud Beis in Parshas Boy, Pasuk Ches, Va'achlu es habasar b'layla hazeh. They shall eat the meat during this night, sli eish. It should be roasted over fire. Umatzais al merayrim yechluhu. And they shall eat it with matzah and bitter herbs. And then the next pasuk goes on to say that the meat should not be half cooked. It shouldn't be boiled in water. It should be roasted over fire, and exactly how it should be roasted. And the next pasuk tells us that none of it can be left over until the next morning. And then famously in pasuk Yud Aleph, the Torah tells us Hashem told the Eden to eat it. Maslechem chagurim na'lechem braglechem umakhelchem biyetchem. They should eat it very ready to leave, with your waist belted, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. V'achaltem oisei b'chipazon, and you should eat it in haste. And in Pasuk Beis, the Eibusher says, I'm going to pass through, and I'm going to es shvatim, I will execute judgment. And in Pasuk Yud Gimel, the Eibusher says that the blood that you put on the lintels of the house will be a sign. Ufasachti alechem, I'll see the blood, I'll pass over you. And this will be a Yom Zikaron, Chukas Olam. And then in Pasuk Tesvav, again, the Torah tells us, Shivas Yamim Matzos Techelun, you'll eat matzah for 7 days, and that you have to take away all chametz. And in Pasuk Yud Zayin, we're told, Ushemartem es hamatzos, you must be vigilant regarding the matzos. Okay. So the Rebbe says that all of this was b'hiyoisem adayim b'mitzrayim. All of the details about the tzivui, about eating matzah, was while they were still in Mitzrayim. And regarding this tzivui, moitzim davar pella, we find something quite shocking, l'chayra, seemingly. Regarding the commandment to eat matzah in every subsequent generation, which comes in Parshas Re'eh, the Torah says, Shivas Yamim Teichel Olav Matzos Lechem Oini Ki B'chipazon Yatzasem Eretz Mitzrayim. For 7 days you shall eat matzah, which is the bread of affliction, or the bread, the impoverished bread, the poor man's bread, because you left Mitzrayim in a great hurry. Umikach leimdim, and from this we learn shamatzah tzricha liyos lechem oini dafka, that the matzah has to be dafka lechem oini, and one way of understanding this halachically is loy matzah ashira. So instead of reading matzah, reading lechem oini as referring to the state of the Jews, whether physically or spiritually, and their impoverishment, in this way of reading it halachically, it's poor bread because it has no extra ingredients, just the bare basics, flour and water. And so halachically we learn from these words that it has to be lechem oini and not matzah ashira, which would have oil, fruit juices, eggs, and so on and so forth. And because in our Parshas Boy, in the psukim that we just read, when it talks about the matzah, it does not use the term lechem oini. Nira, it appears shebimitzrayim yoichlu b'nei Yisrael letzeis yidei choivas achilas matzah gam al yidei achilas matzah shira. It appears that when they were in Mitzrayim and they ate the matzah before taking leave of Mitzrayim, they were able to fulfill their chayva, their obligation to eat matzah through eating matzah shira, because the Torah doesn't use the term lechem oini. Lefizem muvan. So from this, it's understood that although for all the generations on Pesach the matzah would have to be lechem oini dafka, b'chol zois b'geulas Mitzrayim atzma hayamokim gam lematzah ashira. But despite the fact that in subsequent generations it would have to be only lechem oini, but that year, the year of the Geula itself in Mitzrayim, there was place to eat matzah ashira. Achzois, however, on one caveat, loy be'es hayitzia mitzrayim mamash. Their eating of matzah ashira was not when they actually left Mitzrayim. Sharei az achlu b'nei Yisrael lechem oini, because we know that when they left Mitzrayim, they were eating lechem oini. They ate the bread, the matzah made of only flour and water. Ela lifaneha okahachana likrasa. So when did they eat the matzah ashira? They ate the matzah ashira before they left as a hachana, as a preparation for leave taking from Mitzrayim. Seif Beis. Pesach Mitzrayim mahave mokar v'shorish lePesach deres. The Pesach that we celebrated in Mitzrayim creates and is the source and the root of all the subsequent Pesach, all the subsequent Yom Tov Pesach that we would keep in every door. Therefore, move on Efa she'inin shehuva le'il legabe Pesach Mitzrayim shekachana l'tzias Mitzrayim hayamakam lachilas matzah shira tzarich liyois dugmasoi gam bePesach deres. So if Pesach Mitzrayim is the root and the source of every subsequent Pesach, then that means that somehow we also have to have this idea of eating matzah ashira somehow as a preparation for Yom Tov Pesach in every door. There has to be something in that paradigm of matzah ashira that informs our every Pesach. The Mordechai Kasov, so the Mordechai is a Rishon who comments on the Gemara, and he writes, Shebizman Shebeis HaMikdash Kayam, that during the times of the Batei Mikdash, Hayu Oisin Kol HaSeder Achar HaSu'uda. They used to do the Seder of Pesach after the Sudas Yom Tov. V'loi Hayu Oichlin Matzas Mitzvah, Ela La'achar Shemalu Kreisan. And they did not eat the matzah's mitzvah. They did not fulfill the obligation to eat matzah until after their stomachs were full. Ubemehem hayu eichlin matzah ashira al sudasan. And during those days, they used to eat dafka matzah ashira during their suuda. Kedei shabirchas hamaiti shel hasuuda loy te'amer al matzah sheba yikaimu me'ucher yaser. In order that the hamaitzi that they made on the suuda should not include the matzah that they were going to eat later, with which they were going to be mekayim, the mitzvah of eating matzah as a mitzvah. And during the Seder, they ate matzah ashira, so it shouldn't include the matzah of later. And that was mitzvahs achilas matzah. So when they ate the matzah later during the Seder, they were able to make hamaitzi and the bracha al achilas matzah, because what they ate earlier during the Suda was matzah ashira. That's what the Mordechai teaches. And the Rebbe continues, B'daima l'kach, And similar to this, Meitzim Gam Bizman Hazeh, we find something similar today. Although we do the Seder before the Su'udah today, but Hadin Koveya, but Halacha teaches Shebe'erev Pesach Lifnei Hashah Hasiris, before the 10th hour, meaning during the time that you can still eat Chametz Erev Pesach, Mutar Le'echol Matzah Ashira. You're allowed to eat matzah ashira during that time. Although halachically we're not allowed to eat matzah during that time. So in other words, there's different minhagim. We in Chabad we have a minhag that we don't eat matzah for a whole month before, but l'chol hadayis you're not allowed to eat matzah's mitzvah. You're not allowed to eat the matzah that you're going, the kind of matzah you're going to eat later for the seder on that day, but you're allowed to eat matzah ashira in the morning before you have to stop eating chametz. V'yesh loymar, we might say, sha'uvda, sha'halacha matira az achilas matzah ashir mlechatchila, that the very fact that halacha permits that you should eat matzah ashira, and it's not a bidi evet, it's a mlechatchila, Meichicha shebe'erev Pesach kasher miskoininim lepesach l'tias Mitzrayim noisenes haterem makim la'achilas matzah ashira. The Rebbe says we can learn from this that on erev Pesach, when we are getting ready for Pesach and we're getting ready to re-experience Tias Mitzrayim, the Torah gives us place to eat matzah ashira, and the Rebbe is telling us that if it's permitted halachically, then it means that there is a conceptual place for matzah ashira. And the Rebbe is going to explain what is the inyan of matzah ashira versus the matzah that's lechem oini that we're going to eat later. So in other words, to the Rebbe, there's nothing that's just like, yeah, okay, like technically, because of illegality, you could eat it then. No, the Rebbe is saying that there's tremendous import and meaning in the fact that you could eat matzah ashira on Erev Pesach before the Shah Asiris. Siv Gimel. B'tzivoy alachilas lechem oini, shehuva le'il. So regarding the commandment to eat lechem oini, which we spoke about earlier, mitzayin hapasuk es atam l'tzivoy. The Torah gives us the reason. And the Torah says, because in great haste you left Eretz Mitzrayim. And therefore the dough did not have enough time to rise. And so one of the properties of lechem oini is that it's flat. Now, because we're taught that the term lechem oini, that the category lechem oini, in addition to obviating chametz, also does not include matzah ashira. Nira, so then it appears we can surmise, we can extract from this that when the Torah says that the reason you have to eat lechem oini is because you left Mitzrayim in great haste, mahave tam gam lu'uvda she'efshar l'tzeisi de'chebes achilas matzah alidei achilas matzah ashira. This also provides the reason and the fact for why it's not possible to fulfill your obligation to eat matzah through eating matzah ashira. In other words, it doesn't just obviate chametz, but the words kibishipazon yatzasa, which explain why you have to eat lechem oini, also come to be shoylel to obviate matzah ashira. Yesh efer lahavin, so we have to understand keitzad nitan lilmoid min hamilim kibishipazon yatzasa as hasiba lekach she'i efshar l'tzeisi de'chebes achilas matzah alidei achilas matzah ashira. So we have to understand how these words kibishipazon yatzasa, that you left because you left in great haste, how does this provide the reason for why we cannot fulfill our obligation to eat matzah through eating matzah ashira? So the Rebbe says in Seif Dalet, mitchilasoi shel hapasuk shetzutat le'il, from the beginning of the pasuk that we cited above, which is loiseichal olav chametz shivas yamim teichel olav matzahs, that you should not eat chametz during this time. For 7 days you should eat matzahs. Loimdim, we learn she'efshar lekayim mitzvahs achilas matzah rak be'emtzos dvorim haboim l'dei chimutz. We learn through the juxtaposition of the Torah is saying, do not eat chametz during these 7 days. You have to eat matzah during this time. From this, we learn that in order to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah, you could only fulfill it through the agency of something that could become chametz. So in order for it to be halachically viable for fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah, it has to be made out of dough that could become chametz. Hakesher shebein kibichi pazon yatzasa ledin zehu pashut, and the connection between the words "because you left in haste" and this halacha is simple. Because during that first Pesach, when we left Mitzrayim, the Jews were dealing with a dough that could become chametz. And it was only because of the great haste with which they exited Mitzrayim that the dough did not have time to rise and become chametz, to become leavened. So therefore, when we eat matzah, in order to remember the matzah that they ate when they left Mitzrayim, it too has to be made of a dough that could become chametz. And there has to be something that we do that will cause the impossibility of it becoming chametz, which we do by making the matzah very, very quickly and continuously keeping it flat and pummeling it so that it will not rise, and so on and so forth. Tzarich lishmar es hamatzah mechimutz. It has to be watched that it shouldn't become chametz. And this is all Zeicher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, Biprat Shel B'chipazon Yatzasa. And this is all to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim and the fact that they left in great haste. And therefore, the dough that they had, that had the possibility, it did have the properties of leavening, but it wasn't allowed to leaven because of the great haste in which they left. Kevan Shel Shnei Sugei Matzah She'i Efshar L'Tzeis Behem Yedei Chayves Achilas Matzah Ashira, and dvarim she'enam ba'am l'dechimot muva b'pasuk oisei hatam ki bichi pazon yatzasa. Now, because these two categories with which you cannot fulfill the obligation to eat matzah, which one category is matzah ashira, and the other is a dough that is made of things that cannot become chametz, because both of these things are referenced in the pasuk that says "Kibichi pozon yatzasa," because in great haste you left. Move on. It's understood sheleshnei suge matzah elu, that to these two categories of matzah, yesh ba'ofen klali oisei pegam legabe kiyum mitzvahs achilas matzah be'emtzuosam. They both have the same deficit. They both have the same flaw, which is why you cannot fulfill the mitzvah of matzah through their agency. Okay, because we know we can only make matzah from wheats that, when combined with water, will leaven. But for instance, you can't make matzah out of cornmeal or corn flour, because while corn can ferment, it cannot leaven. And therefore, it's not kosher for making matzah. So the Rebbe says that because these two categories are both alluded to in this pasuk, one is matzah ashira, where you do start with a wheat that can, when mixed with water, become leaven, but instead of water, you use fruit juice, or you use oil, or you use eggs, or any combination thereof, and therefore, again, it cannot become chametz. Or the second category is making a matzah out of a flour that, when combined with water, will not become chametz. Both of these cannot be used to fulfill the obligation of eating matzah. And so there has to be a connection between these two categories. So on one hand, there's a connection. Mitzat sheni, on the other hand, moitzim, we find shahalacha legabe matzah ashira nemer rak bepesach dayres, that the halacha regarding matzah ashira was only said regarding our Pesach that we would keep in the generations after, but not in Mitzrayim. In Mitzrayim, it seems that they were able to eat matzah ashira. Ola umazais, as halacha shamatzah shalel Pesach tzricha liyos mibatza kazeh shehi yecholu levo lidei chimutz anu moitzim bo'efen klali kfar bepesach Mitzrayim. So, in contradistinction to the halacha or the tzibui that we would not be able to eat, or rather, we would not be able to fulfill the obligation to eat matzah through lechem ashira. This was only given for the Pesach l'daires, for the Pesach that we would keep later. But in contradistinction to that, the halacha that the matzah has to be made of dough that can come to leavening, we find this already in the Pesach of Mitzrayim. Kefisha nilmad b'Yerushalmi, like the Yerushalmi learns min hapasuk, from the pasuk ushmartem es hamatzos, from the words and you shall guard the matzos. The Gemara learns out that it has to be made out of ingredients that need guarding, because they could become chametz, and therefore you have to watch over them very, very vigilantly. Shenita l'tzeis hidei chayva rak be'emtzos matzah shetzricha shimur. The Gemara teaches that you can only fulfill your obligation through the agency of matzah that needs watching, that needs to be carefully guarded. Kiloymar, this is to say, Lamroi shebepesach Mitzrayim efshar haya l'tzeis hidei chayva achilas matzah lidei achilas matzah shira. This teaches us that although in Mitzrayim they were able to fulfill their obligation by eating matzah ashira, however, but in Mitzrayim too, the matzah ashira that they ate had to be matzah that needs guarding. And the Rebbe explains, how would this be? Because normally matzah ashira would not come to chimutz, would not come to be leavened. But the Rebbe says, Kigoyin, for instance, Isa she'arbebu ba mayim im mei peres. But this would be a dough in which you also put in water in addition to the mei peres, to the juice extracted from fruits. She'az hiba l'dei chimutz. Because then it can come to leaven, va'adarabah, and on the contrary, mimaheres lahachametz, it even comes to leavening more quickly than regular matzah dough that's made just from flour and water. Okay. Hey, so now the Rebbe now that the Rebbe pointed out to us that there were different kinds of matzah, and the Rebbe pointed out the different times that we were commanded, and we should make a distinction between that. Now the Rebbe is going to tell us what this signifies and what this symbolizes in Avodas Hashem. Hahezber l'chol zeh al pi primiusam shel inyanim. So what's the explanation for all of this on the innermost level, al pi chasidus? So the Rebbe says, Yuvan will understand this be'emtzos havharas hahevdel ha'terchani shebein lechem oini lebein matzah ashira biyachas la'avodas Hashem. We will understand this through explaining the difference on a conceptual level between lechem oini and matzah ashira vis-a-vis our avodas Hashem. So the Rebbe says, lechem oini nesva mibatze ka'asoi rak mikemach umayim. Lechem oini is made from a dough that is comprised only of flour and water. She'ein lahem shum ta'am. And the matzah is therefore tasteless. It's not enriched with any other ingredients that would make it taste particularly good. Matzah ashira le'umazais, But in contradistinction, matzah shira, ne'efes me'isa, shenilusha im yayin, shemen, udvash. Matzah shira is baked from a dough that is kneaded with wine, with oil, with honey, meperes acherim, or other types of fruit juices, hamoisifim tam le'isa. And these ingredients add taste. In Yanam B'avodas Hashem hu kedelahalan. And what this symbolizes in Avodas Hashem is as follows. Lechem oini misamel avoda mitoch kabbalas ol, v'loy mitoch tainug v'hana. Lechem oini, the poor bread, as it were, the impoverished bread, bereft of any enriching ingredients that would give a taste, signifies avoda done through kabbalas ol. We do it because we accept the yoke of Hashem upon us, and we do it, whether it gives us tainuk v'hana, whether we're going to take pleasure from it or not. We do it with kabbalas ol. Lamroi shebesechel ein shum hesberim u'koteitzah mikach ein gam tainug linyanim elikim, and because with our seichel we can't understand it, and as a result of our not being able to understand it, we don't take pleasure in these godly things. Still in all, the Jew serves Hashem with kabbalas ol. Matzah ashira le'umayzos, but in contrast, matzah ashira he avoida mitoch tam vadas. This symbolizes the avoida that we do with our understanding. Avoida sheyesh ba tam hana'ah. And this we find often in Chassidus. The word tam means both a reason and it means taste, because when we understand the reason for something, it gives us more of a taste. It gives us more hana in doing it. That's just the way sentient people are wired. Kasher avodas shel Yehudi hirak mitoch kabbalas ol liloy hatam shel seichel u'midos rikshus. When the avodah of a Jew is only from the perspective of kabbalas ol, it is propelled and fueled only by his kabbalas ol. There is no reason. He does not involve his seichel or his midos, his feelings, his emotions. Harei hushari b'matzav shalafi seichlo u'midosav yesh etzloi makom lihisnahig acheres. Okay, spoiler alert. There's a lot of times in Chassidus when we learn different from what the Rebbe is going to explain now. But here the Rebbe says like this, that when you do it just with kabbalas ol, then the Jew is in a situation where, based on his cognition and his emotions, there is place for him to act differently. La'asos ra, to do something that is not what the Eibishter wants. Ella, but it's only shebe'amtzos hakoyach shel kabbalas ha'ol, but it's through the agency of his accepting upon himself the yoke of heaven, hu machnia es hara, he subdues the evil aspect, and this is iskafia, kfias hara, he forces the evil, vu oived es Hashem. So he subserviates the evil and he serves Hashem. So in many other places, in the Rebbe's Chassidus, it talks about how when you do things only through seichel, that's when you could get into trouble, because our seichel is limited and our seichel is fickle, and therefore the basis has to be kabbalas ol. Here the Rebbe is saying that when you do it only with kabbalas ol, because you're not engaging your seichel and your midos, so there is room for you to do the opposite, because you're approaching what you're doing only, quote unquote, through kabbalas ol. Maybe in more contemporary terminology, you would say that there isn't the buy-in, the human, buy-in to the concept. So there's that resistance that remains. In contrast to this, kasher havoda hi mitoch tam vadas, when the avodas Hashem is through understanding, b'shleimus, completely, Shoylelim hasechel v'hamidus is have shoras lasas is a hefach me'eretzon Hashem. So this obviates the possibility of doing something that is opposite Hashem's desire, because your sechel and your midas are aligned with what Hashem wants from you, and therefore ein kol ra, there's no evil. And this is already this would be something that would be in a category of ishafcha, hafichas hara l'toiv muchlat, completely transforming the evil to something categorically and completely good, positive. The Rebbe says this is the connection between the two categories of matzah that we enumerated above, the category of matzah ashira and the category of matzah ha'asuya midvarim she'enam boim l'dei chimutz, matzah made of things that cannot become chametz. For instance, matzah that would be made, again, from flour that does not leaven. And this would be the connection between Yusuf Shalanyanim on the deeper level, on how Chassidus illuminates it. One of the details that the Rebbe is going to talk about comes as a result of the other. Avoida that comes in the paradigm of quote unquote matzah ashira, completely matzah ashira, which would be avoida mitoich sechel umidos, avoida that is propelled by our sechel and by our emotions, because we really understand the reason, and therefore we have complete buy-in, and we are cognitively and emotively aligned. Sheileles efshara shel chimutz v'ra. It obviates the possibility for something bad to occur. Just like matzah ashira on the pshat level, matzah ashira that you buy in the store, you make, can never come to chametz. And the Rebbe says kerugil, under normal circumstances. But if you put some water in it, like it seems they had to do in Mitzrayim before they left, then it could come to chimutz. But under normal circumstances, matzah shira cannot come to chimutz. So this signifies the avodah of tam vadas. You're completely aligned, and therefore you're not going to veer off because you're all in. Rak avodah shalechem oini kabbalas ol. It's only the modality of serving Hashem with lechem oini, meaning impoverished bread. There's no wine, there's no oil, there's no honey, you have no taste. This me'afsheres himatzus shel chametz v'ra. This allows for the existence of chametz and evil. Zehu lechem hayochel lo v'lidei chimutz. This is bread, this is matzah that can come to chimutz. But just like physically, you keep pummeling the dough and you do it so quickly to get it into the oven to aviate chimutz, in the same way, metaphorically speaking, in the avoida that is propelled by Kabbalas Ol, we have to constantly be subduing and subserviating the Ra, ve'ein ma'afshirim hispashtos, and we don't allow the Ra to take hold, as it were, hagba'a v'chimutz, to raise its head, as it were, to go higher and to come to full-blown chimutz. How do we do this? Al yidei ushmartem, through guarding it. Al yidei avoida masmedes v'askos, through constant avoida and constant engagement. So it's a full-time job to keep the Ra within us at bay, because we don't have full buy-in. We don't understand it. So we're doing it with Kabbalah soul, but at any moment, we can just, chas v'chalila, throw that all off. We can cast it off. So constantly, ushmartim, you have to watch over it. So now the question in the mind is, so which one is it that we need? which modality does Eibishter want from us? Which modality does he ask of us? So the Rebbe says, Shnei oifanei ha'avoda mizbatim ba'ofen kloli b'shnei hasugim hakloli shel geula. Of course, in the Rebbe's Torah, it's always both. Both of these modalities express in a general way the two general categories or the two general types of geula. There's geulas Mitzrayim and there's a geula ha'asida, the one that we are approaching imminently any moment now. So there's two different geulas. B'yetzias Mitzrayim kasuv ki barach ha'am chipazon. Regarding the leaf taking from Mitzrayim, the Torah tells us that the nation fled in great haste. And the Alter Rebbe explains that this was ki hara shebenefashes Yisrael adayin haya b'takfai, because the evil that was in the souls of Bnei Yisrael was still very, very strong. They didn't have to flee from the Mitzrayim, because at that point the Mitzrayim gave them full license to do whatever they want. The Mitzrayim were afraid of Bnei Yisrael. They wanted them to leave with alacrity because they were afraid of them, but it wasn't like they had to run away, because if not, the Egyptians would, trap them. But the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, it's because they had to flee from themselves, as it were. They had to flee from the Ra that was betakfa in their neshamas. V'lachein hayu muchrachim livrayach min hara mitumas Mitzrayim. They had to leave because, as we know, they were already sunk into the 49th to the Mem Teshari Tuma, and another minute or two, and it would have been too late. V'zehu inyan shalechem oini avodah shel iskafia. And this calls forth the inyan of lechem oini, the inyan of iskafia, of having to override and subserviate the Ra that is within us. Ach loi kain la'asit lavai. But this is not what will be la'asit lavai. Oz yeh loi b'chipazon telechu. The Navi in Shayo describes that we will not leave in a hurry. Ves ruach hatuma avir min haaretz. And the Eibishter will completely remove tuma from the world. That will be a matzav shel hisafcha. This is a time where the Ra will be completely transformed. This is the modality of matzah ashira. That cannot come to chimutz. Zeu hahezber lekach shebechipazon yotzasa. Mahavetam lahalacha shemata shel pesach einena yechol yes matzah ashira. This is the explanation of why this idea that we left in a hurry creates the reason in halacha that the matzah of the Leil Pesach cannot be matzah ashira. And it also cannot be matzah that is made of ingredients that cannot leaven. Because that spiritual situation of having to leave in great haste, because the Ra is still very prominent and very strong, this necessitates avodah of Kabbalas Ol. It necessitates a avodah of iskafia, which is symbolized by the lechem oini. Now the Rebbe says, however, there's another kind of matzah. There's a matzah ashira. So we understand why we have to eat lechem oini by the Seder, and we can only fulfill our chiyuv to eat matzah through lechem oini by the Seder. We understand that. But what's the place of lechem ashira? So the Rebbe says, ha'alacha shebepesach ein yotzim midei chayvus achilas matzah lidei chilas matzah ashira einena rak mepnei shemashmu usa hapnimis shel matzah ashira einena kamei geulas Mitzrayim. The Rebbe says we don't fulfill our chiyuv to eat matzah through eating matzah ashira, not only because on the deeper level matzah ashira doesn't correlate with what happened during the geulas Mitzrayim, That they left in a great hurry, and this was because of the evil that still was within them, and therefore they needed Kabbalas Ol, and they needed the Avodah Viskafia, and that is symbolized by the Lechem Oini. But the Rebbe says it's not just that. Elagam epnei shelechem oini, v'kach gam legulas Mitzrayim yesh yisrain al pnei matzah ashira. It's because there is a superlative property and characteristic of matzah that is lechem oini over matzah ashira. And this is also the property of the geula shel asid lavai, the geula that is coming. Bis hafcha matzah shira haram bis batel lechalutin. It's true that in matzah ashira, which is the modality of hafcha, that the evil, the ra, is completely nullified. Ach bechol zois yesh yishon briskafia. Even as it's true that there's something very special about the matzah ashira because it symbolizes a time where there's no ra, but at the same time, there's something special about the matzah, the lechem oini, the inyan of iskafia. Because rak avodah zu krucha b'yigi asoy shala adam. Olav lilchaim lachnia esara. Because only this avodah, the lechem oini avodah, the lechem of iskafia, the lechem that necessitates constant work on our part, is comprised of our yigia, of our labor, because we have to fight for it. We have to fight the ra. We have to do battle with it, and we have to continuously subserviate it. Or to say in a different way, avodah shel hafcha mivataz es his achdusay shel adam im elokus ayidei shu mezachach es atzmai ad kedei kach. The avodah of his hafcha, the matzah ashira, expresses our unity with Hashem. It expresses the way in which we've become so refined that our very refined existence does not allow for evil, just like the matzah ashira that does not allow for chimos. Iskafia, on the other hand, mivataz as his batlus, his masrus lelikus. The matzah, the lechem oini, the avodah of iskafia, expresses our nullification and our complete devotion and dedication to elikus. Lefi sichloi u'midosav yesh makom ve'efsharis lara. If it was up to us, based on our cognition and our emotions, there would be possibility of trespassing Hashem's word, Chalila. There is place for Ra. And despite that fact, we force ourselves. We do the opposite of what our mitzius would ask for, meaning we don't understand it logically, and we don't have a particular emotive alignment or resonance with what it is that we have to do. Umekayim es ratzon Hashem, and nevertheless we fulfill Hashem's desire. And the Rebbe says remarkably, Zehu echad hasberim lekach shagam b'geula hasida yazech l'tiyas Mitzrayim. And this is one of the ways of understanding that it says, and if you look at the footnote, the Rebbe brings down from Micha, that regarding the Geula Ha'asida, it will be like when you went out of Mitzrayim, I'll show you wonders. Because the ultimate goal is sheyu shnei hayisroines biyachad, that both of these qualities, both of these milas, help me here, both of these superlative qualities should be together. Gam kasher nimtzoim b'daga shel hashafcha. When Mashiach will come and we will be on the level of hashafcha, zichuch mitzius ha'adam lechalutin will be completely refined. Ad she'ein klal mokim l'ra, until there'll be no place for ra. Gam oz kayim hayisun shebiskafia geulas mitzrayim. We will still tap in to this, to the Maila of Iskafia, which was present and was showcased during the Geula of Mitzrayim. His batlusay shel adam, the way in which we nullify ourselves, hamisbatas ba'avoda v'yigia, which is expressed through our work and through our toil. It's hard work to constantly do something that you don't especially feel emotionally or logically aligned with. So the Rebbe now explained to us how we're going to have this idea when Mashiach comes, that even though it's going to be l'chayr, a time of hishafcha, it's going to be a time of matzah ashira, as it were, we're going to be on that level, but there still has to be the lechem oini. There still has to be the skafia. Now, on the other side, the Rebbe says, Admor Hazoki Masbir B'Sifrei Torah Or. The Alter Rebbe explains in Torah Or, Shebekach Shebegeulas Mitzrayim Ksuva Shtei Aliyos V'Anoichi Alcha Gam Alei, that just like it says, or because it says regarding the Geula of Mitzrayim, the expression is, and I will take you up, I will elevate you. The Eibusha says twice, Alei, hakavana higam aliyah hashniya shetia begeula hasida. That this alludes to the second elevation. The first time was Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, and the second is Hashem will take us out of the Golus. Move on, so it's understood. Shekashem shekulas Mitzrayim tizacher b'tashpia ala geula hasida. That just like the Rebbe outlined in Siv Zayin, the one we just did, that during the time of the geula hasida, there will still be remembrance, and there will still be the influence of geulas Mitzrayim. Kach gam begeulas Mitzrayim tzricha liyos mergeshes haftachasei v'dibur shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'kesher legeula hasida. So too, in like fashion, there has to be something now during the geula from Mitzrayim that is connected to, in which we feel Hashem's promise regarding the Geula Hasida. HaHezber L'kach, the explanation is, Hayecheles v'ha'omes lihilochim b'ra u'lenatzchoi gam kasher hara b'teikvoi. The possibility and the strength to do battle with evil and to overcome it and to be victorious, even as the Ra is still very strong, even as we are in Golos. And even after we break it, it still remains strong. Just like it was the first time we left Mitzrayim, and that's why the Jews had to flee. So where do we get the koyach to do this? Misafshrim b'siyu hahakora v'hargosha shehavoda shel iskafia tavi b'seifa shel davar l'ishafcha. We get the strength to do this, and we get the help that we need through the recognition and the feeling that our avoda of iskafia that we're engaged in now will at the end yield to a safra. So this motivates us. This is the light at the end of the tunnel. And therefore, even before the Geula of Mitzrayim, and therefore the Eibusha said to Moshe, not just Alcha, I will take you up, but Alcha Gamalei, he already promised then about the Geula HaSida, and we, Erev Pesach, eat or can eat, have the possibility of eating matzah ashira. which is the matzah of his hafcha, which is the matzah of the Geula Hasida. Now the Rebbe says in Sif Tes, Haskaras HaGeula Hasida beGeulas Mitzrayim, remembering the Geula HaAsida in the Geula of Mitzrayim, is not only to broadcast that there's going to be a Geula HaAsida, Ela Zuigam Nisinas Koyach Liyashim Zois Ba'avodas Adam B'Hoive, but it also, like the Rebbe explained above, gives us the koyach to execute our avoda in the present. Shekvar betchilas ha'avoda golas Mitzrayim tia kayemes avoda shel me'ein hagula asida. Even before we start the avoda of golas Mitzrayim, of leave taking from golas Mitzrayim, we already have something that is me'ein, that is like the Geula HaAsida. We already taste the matzah ashira. We already taste the matzah of his hafcha. And it would seem we could ask, we are just at the beginning. It's Erev Pesach. We haven't yet come to the Seder. We haven't done the avodah b'chol dor v'dor. And the Ra is still very strong. Ketzad how is it possible that we should be engaged in avodah that's a me'ein that is like the Geula HaSida? Shen yana hu hisafcha, because the Geula HaSida is all about everything, all the Ra already being transformed. Hey adrus muchlete shel Ra, complete obliteration of Ra. So how can we say that we're already engaged in eating matzah ashira, the matzah that speaks of ishafcha, the matzah of geula? Hahesber lekachu, the explanation is, lamroi shebetchilas havodah nena kayemes is batlusa shel hara. Although it's true that at the beginning of the avodah there is not yet the complete obliteration of the evil, ulefichach havodah hi b'derech milchama v'kabbalas ol, and therefore the avodah is in a way of doing battle and necessitates Kabbalas ol, as the Rebbe has explained earlier. B'chol zois ein ha'izbatlus u'Kabbalas ha'ol tzriches liyetz rak b'derech hechrach. Okay, this is really quite astoundingly gorgeous. The Rebbe says, yes, it's true. We're still in a time of Kabbalas ol, but his batlos, but the nullification of self, the Kabbalas ol, should still not be completely in a way that we're forcing ourselves. Ela yesh likshar es his batlos atzma lemitzias adam. But we should connect the way in which we are nullifying ourselves to our existence. You should get buy-in from your seichel and from your midas to agree to your nullification, your self-nullification, your kabbalas ol. V'az tia avoda mitach kabbalas ol miluve gam b'tainug. And then your avoda of kabbalas ol will be accompanied with pleasure. In other words, you will take pleasure in the fact that you are doing avodah mitzat kabbalas ol. Rebbe says, yes, kabbalas ol is necessary, but it's okay if you could get yourself to a place where you're already tasting the matzah ashira aspect, even as you're going towards a Yom Tov where you can only do the mitzvah through lechem oini. It's okay to tether your kabbalas ol to a part of your cognition and your emotions that could get aligned and take pleasure in the fact that you're a kabbalas ol yid. Kiloimar, this is to say, hageula hasida shebetoich geulas Mitzrayim einena ha'avoda shel seichel u'midas b'fnei atzman. So this modality of the geula hasida that is already injected in the modality of the geula from Mitzrayim is not an avoda of seichel and midas on their own. Ha'mevia b'seifel es hafcha, which brings to complete transformation. Elohi mahave prat b'toich ha'eskafia, but rather it creates a new aspect within this skafia of Gulas Mitzrayim. And that is ha'avoida mitoch kabbalas ol miluve b'tainuk. It's kabbalas ol that is accompanied by, maybe we could say, infused with pleasure. B'daima lekach gama inishal Gulas Mitzrayim sheyuskar lasid lavoi hu prat b'geula hasida. Just like the inyan that we will remember Geulas Mitzrayim by the Geula of La'asid is going to be an aspect in the Geula of La'asid. It's going to be an aspect in the overwhelming energy of the Geula of La'asid. Ikar his alus ba'asid hu zichuch matias ha'adam is hafra. The main energy, the main elevation of the future Geula is going to be all about the refinement of the existence of the person, is hafra. This is amazing. But our refinement will not be measured and will not be limited to how much a person can refine themselves based on their own existence. But it's going to transcend our normal parameters. And this is only through Iskafia. This is only through Kabbalas Ol. This is the Maila of Ispatlos. This is the Maila of self-nullification. And Zehu ha'hezber l'kach she'hamatzah she'achlu b'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim ka'achon l'tzias Mitzrayim yechayla liyas matzah ashira. And now we have a new appreciation for why the matzah that Bnei Yisrael ate in Mitzrayim as a hachana for leaving could have been matzah ashira. Ach mitzayet sheni hi ha'isa tzricha liyas matzah she'tzricha shimor. But on the other hand, it still had to be matzah ashira that had some water in it and therefore necessitated shimor. It necessitated guarding. Al smach ha'iskalalu shel ha'geula ha'asida be'geulas Mitzrayim misafsheres matzah ashira gam b'toich Mitzrayim. Because of the hiskalulus, because of the inclusion, the inter-inclusion of the geula ha'asida in the geula of Mitzrayim, that allowed for matzah ashira while they were still in Mitzrayim. Ach geulas Mitzrayim yechayla lehidamois legeula hasida rak biprat shel ashira. But the geula from Mitzrayim was able to be similar to the geula hasida only in this detail of ashira. Shekabbalas ha'ol atzma tiya meluva b'tam v'tainuk. That the kabbalas all that was necessary to leave Mitzrayim should be accompanied with understanding, with taste, and with pleasure. But not regarding the idea that the Geula Hasida will not come through matzah that can come lidei chimutz, isafcha. Because the idea of ishafcha cannot exist when the Ra is still strong. So you can have an infusion of it. You could have a prat, you could have a strand, but it's not in full-blown expression. All of the above is regarding the time that Bnei Yisrael was still in Mitzrayim before the Geula. But when they actually left Mitzrayim, after the Geula, and in like fashion, the matzah that we eat every year on the Leil Pesach to remember the Yetziah from Mitzrayim, this has to be only and exclusively lechem oini. Hezbarim shaladvarim. And what's the explanation? Hayetziah mimitzrayim gorma lekach shebnei Yisrael kfar loy hayu avdei pare. With leaf taking from Mitzrayim, this gave rise to a situation in which Bnei Yisrael were no longer the servants of Parai. V'niyu avdei Hashem, and rather they became the servants of Hashem. Kalemar, that is to say, Hem hayu az b'darga shel kabalos malchusa yizbarech. They were in the level and the category of people who had accepted upon themselves the kingship of Hashem, Sheba lefnei kabalos ha'ol lekayim tzivoy Hashem, which precedes coming to a place where you accept upon yourself the mitzvahs of Hashem. Koloshon Chazal, like Chazal tell us in the Mishnah in Brachos, Yikabel olav ol malchus shemayim tchila. First, a person should accept upon themselves ol malchus shemayim, v'achar kach yikabel olav ol mitzvahs, and then you accept upon yourself the ol of mitzvahs. B'avoida zu, in this avoida of completely becoming an Eved Hashem, ein la'arev es metzias ha'adam. There you don't mix in the existence of self. That you're not allowed to even blink when you're standing before the king. In other words, you have to be in complete subservience. You're not allowed to do any most subtle movement in front of a king. And what happens if you do? God forbid, this person is chayiv misa. So Kabbalah's all necessitates complete nullification of the self. And lefichach asur la'ariv kan es hatam v'hatainuk shel matzah ashira. And therefore, the matzah that they ate when they left Mitzrayim, the matzah that we eat every year has to be lechem oini. It has to be the matzah of bittul. It has to be the matzah of iskafia. We're not allowed to mix in tam v'tainuk shel matzah ashira. Ki kabbalas malchus shel Kadosh Baruch Hu le'asais avdei Hashem, because accepting the yoke of heaven, the sovereignty of Hashem, to become Hashem's servant, he be'emtzos lechem oini bilvad. This can only be done through the agency of lechem oini, his batlus muchletas, complete self-nullification. So even though we don't want to peel sacks of potatoes, self-nullification. And that's how we're able to come into Pesach properly. I think maybe by doing all the stuff we really don't want to do. I can't be the only one that doesn't want to peel sacks of potatoes. So we got our hisbatlas all figured out.
Delegate.
Yeah, but then I don't know. Then you're gonna have to find another way to be mevatel zich. Of course, hopefully we all have help, but the potatoes on the one hand and the getting rid of the chametz on the other hand still, I think, lies on our shoulders in the main.
Mm-hmm. I give you so much credit to be able to calmly teach a sikha today.
No, you don't understand. This is exactly what I need. I don't deserve any credit. This is the most self-serving thing of all. What are the other choices, by the way?
Well, you could jump up every 5 minutes like I did.
I ran away to my office where there's nothing to jump to.
I give you a lot of credit.
Anyway, wishing us all, B'tay Klal Yisrael, Chag Kosher v'Sameach, and Cheres Amiti, and we should already Noichal Sham min Azvachim min Apsachim. It's time. Anybody wants to say a few words, please? We would love to hear something inspiring.
Rivky, I find it interesting that we talked about Kabbalah's oil, that ever talked about this matzah, aini, that's the only thing we can do. This is just an observation. And yet the entire Seder is about discussion, which is getting on board with Seichel. So just look at that balance that you have, that even though the lechem is the Kabbalah soil, yet the Seder is set up for hours and hours on discussion of understanding. So
And
it's
the
interesting.
4 cases of wine, which wine in Chassidus is always about Tam V'das.
That's right. That's right. So it's just an interesting balance here. I just want to, just a funny thing, but one year I'm peeling, we have a kosher Meals on Wheels program. So literally we're talking about giving out this year, like 800 meal. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you, right?
Wow.
So the amount of potato peeling isn't, and the kitchen is in my basement. We don't yet have a commercial Pesach kitchen, hopefully by next year. But one year I'm like so frustrated with this peeling. I can't, like, Abish, there enough already. What is this? And potatoes and sweet potatoes, and you go through all the other stuff. It's like vast. And then as I'm peeling, I'm thinking, what is peeling anyway? And really peeling is to get to the essence. You peel to get to the fruit. And I thought, wow, that's the beginning of us as a people. Peel away and get to who you really are.
Wow.
And after that, the peeling didn't take, the iskafia now became, once I had the seichel in it, it became much easier.
It
So
was already infected with the Savcha.
there you go. So I'm telling you, peeling today is not the same for me anymore, because every time I peel, I think about that. I think, peel away, peel away. This is for the whole year. You got one.
So you're going to have to find another way for his batless, Esther.
Oh, boy. Are you kidding? Kabbalah sale doesn't come easy to me.
Oh, like it comes easy to anybody.
Yeah, anyway, you should have a kosher for Elfin Pesach. This is wonderful that you did this
I
today.
mean, all of us together. A good gebencht Jahr, and we'll see each other mit Hashem. If you made it this Monday, then mit Hashem on Chol Hamoed as well. The Chol Hamoed is a different reason to run away and learn a sicha. Then the kids start asking what they're going to eat and where they're going to go. That could be harder than peeling potatoes. Kol tov, everybody.
Thank you for
Thank
kosher
you,
for
Yom
Pesach.
Tov.